I wasn't supposed to see him that day. It had been 10 years since I left our old town. 10 years since I'd said goodbye to Ethan under the grey morning sky at the bus station. I thought I'd closed that chapter for good. But fate has a strange way of looping back when you least expect it. It was a Saturday morning in late autumn, and I'd come home to help my mother clear out her attic. The neighborhood felt smaller, quieter. Kids' bikes leaned against fences. Leaves danced in the wind, and the air smelled like rain on old pavement. Then I saw him. Ethan, standing by that same blue door, the one that used to haunt my dreams. He was taller now, his shoulders broader, but the way he stood, it was exactly the same, like he was still waiting for someone. For a second, I couldn't move. My heart did that strange, heavy thing it used to do back when I was 17. Then he looked up and his eyes met mine. He froze, then smiled, that same small, quiet smile I remembered too well. Lena, he said softly. Like the name was something fragile. Hi, I managed. Though my voice barely came out, I crossed the street before I could talk myself out of it. The closer I got, the clearer I could see it. The tiredness in his face, the faint sadness that never really left. I heard about your dad, I said gently. He nodded, his gaze drifting toward the house. Yeah, it's been strange. We stood there for a while, just listening to the sound of the wind scraping through the trees. The blue door behind him creaked a little. I wanted to ask everything I'd never said, but before I could, a woman's voice called out from inside. Ethan, we need to go soon. I froze. The voice was unfamiliar, soft, cheerful, and it hit me in an odd way that he wasn't alone anymore. He turned back toward the door, then looked at me again. I'm sorry. I have to. It's fine, I said quickly, forcing a smile. Really? He hesitated. Wait. Do you have time later? There's something I want to show you. My heart did that thing again. Sure, I said. He nodded once, and then he was gone. Inside that house that had always felt too big, too silent. That evening, I found myself back at the park where we used to spend hours talking about dreams that never quite happened. The sun was setting behind the trees, the sky bruised with orange and gold. I didn't know why I came. Maybe to remember who we were, or maybe to see if he'd still show up. He did. Right on time. He walked toward me carrying a small box. His fingers brushed the lid like it held something alive. What's that? I asked. He didn't answer. He sat down beside me and placed the box between us. Something I should have given you a long time ago. I stared at it. It was a wooden box, old and faded, with our initials carved into the top. E+L. I blinked in shock. You kept this? He smiled faintly. You made it. Remember? Of course I remembered. I'd carved it one summer afternoon when we were 16, sitting on his porch with a borrowed pocket knife. He'd laughed because I'd misspelled my own name. Open it, he said quietly. Inside were small pieces of our past, a paper plane, a photo from our school trip, and a folded letter, yellowed at the edges. I picked it up. What's this? He looked away. Something I wrote the day you left. My heart thudded in my chest. Slowly I unfolded the letter. The handwriting was his uneven, emotional. If you ever come back, and I'm not the same, it's because I couldn't stay the boy you knew. I had to become someone else to survive this house. The words blurred for a second. I blinked fast. Ethan. What does that mean? He took a long breath, his hands clasped together. There's something you never knew about me. Something I couldn't say back then. I looked at him. The same quiet eyes, the same stillness that once hid too much. After you left, he continued softly. Things changed here. I thought I'd finally be free when he was gone. But then, he stopped, struggling with his words. Then I found out something that made me question everything. Even my father, even my own memories. What are you talking about? I asked. He turned to me. His eyes shimmered under the fading light. The reason I waited for him to leave home every morning. It wasn't what you think. I frowned, confused. Then what was it? He didn't answer. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small silver key, one I hadn't seen before. This, he said, placing it in my hand, opens the attic in that house. I think you deserve to see what's inside. My breath caught. Ethan, what's in there? He stood up slowly, looking toward the blue door in the distance. The truth, he said. And once you see it, you'll understand why I could never leave. The wind picked up, rustling the trees around us. I stared at the key in my palm, the metal cold against my skin, feeling the weight of a story I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. When I looked up again, Ethan was already walking away, back toward that house, toward the secret he'd kept all those years. And that's when I realized I wasn't just visiting my past. I was about to step straight into it. The silver key felt heavier than it should. I turned it in my hand as I walked back to my car, replaying every word Ethan said. You'll understand why I could never leave. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. Older, calmer, but shadowed by something unspoken. So I did what I always do when I can't quiet my mind. I went back to where it all began. It started with rain. We were kids, me in a yellow raincoat. Him without one, standing outside his house as the storm poured down. He was trying to fix his bike chain, his hair soaked, his shoes muddy. I remember shouting, "You'll catch a cold." He looked up, water dripping from his lashes. "It's already broken," he said, laughing softly. The bike, not me. That was Ethan, always pretending things didn't hurt. I handed him my umbrella, and from that day we became inseparable. He was the boy who walked me to school every morning, the one who never spoke much, but when he did, it mattered. I was the loud one. He was the listener. We fit without trying. In middle school, we'd sit under that maple tree near the field. He'd sketch in his notebook while I told him my wild plans about moving to the city, becoming someone. He'd smile and say, "You already are." I didn't realize then that I was his reason to smile. But time has a way of changing everything. When we turned 17, I started noticing things. How his eyes dimmed whenever he looked toward home. How he flinched when a man's voice called from inside that blue door. I never saw his father, not once, but I always felt the tension when his name came up. Still, Ethan never spoke badly of him. Never complained. He just avoided him, always waiting for the sound of the front gate closing before going in. One afternoon, I asked, "Why don't you stay inside when your dad's home?" He hesitated. "Because when he's here, there's no room to breathe." I laughed lightly, trying to make it less serious. "What, does he take up all the air?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Something like that." We let the subject drop, but the silence stayed between us. Then came the day everything fell apart. It was senior year. I'd gotten accepted to a college 3 hours away. I ran to tell him first. I wanted him to be proud. But when I got to his house, I saw something through the window that made me stop. Ethan was talking to his father. Or rather, being talked at. His father's hands moved sharply, his face tight with anger. Ethan stood frozen, his jaw clenched, eyes full of something I'd never seen before. Fear. I turned and left before they saw me. I didn't want to embarrass him. I told myself it wasn't my place. But the next day, when I tried to talk to him, he barely looked at me. "Ethan, what happened?" I asked. Nothing. I'm fine. You're not. He finally turned to me. Voice low. Lena, maybe it's better if we stop talking for a while. I thought I'd misheard. Stop talking. He looked away. You're leaving soon anyway. The words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to argue, to tell him distance didn't matter. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. And something in his expression told me not to push Dot, so I left. And that's how silence grew between us. Not from anger, but from confusion. I told myself he didn't care. I built walls around that ache and called it moving on. But now, years later, holding that silver key, I wasn't sure if I ever really did. The next morning, I drove past his house again. The sun was barely up, and the blue door shimmered faintly in the light. My fingers tightened around the key in my pocket. I wasn't ready to use it yet, but I needed to understand what it meant, Dot, so I called my mother. Mum, did you ever know Ethan's father? She paused. A little. Why? What was he like? There was a sigh on the other end. Complicated, strict, quiet man. Your father used to say he was brilliant, though. Worked with old records, family archives, things like that. Always in that attic of his. Records? I repeated. Yes, he used to say every family has stories that should stay hidden. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. After the call, I sat in my car, staring at that house. The attic window was cracked open slightly. Curtains shifting with the breeze. I wondered how many times Ethan had looked out of that same window, wishing for something beyond it. Then I noticed something I'd never seen before. On the wall near the porch, faded beneath chipped paint, was a small carving. I stepped closer to look. It was faint, but I could still read it. E+L. Promise. I froze. It was the same carving I'd made on that old wooden box years ago, the one he showed me last night. But I never carved it on the wall, which meant someone else did. And somehow, I knew, it wasn't Ethan. The past wasn't what I thought it was. Someone else had been watching us back then. Close enough to know our secret initials. Close enough to leave a mark. The blue door creaked open slightly behind me, and a familiar voice said quietly, "You weren't supposed to see that." I turned, and Ethan was standing there. I froze when I heard his voice. Ethan stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. The morning light cut across his face, half in shadow, half in gold. I hadn't planned on seeing him again so soon, but there he was, the boy I used to know, standing like a memory that refused to fade. I wasn't trying to snoop, I said quickly, stepping back from the wall. He shook his head. You were always curious. That hasn't changed. His tone wasn't angry, just tired. And that made it worse somehow. I looked at the faint carving again. E+L promise. Who did that? I asked quietly. He hesitated, then walked closer. Not me. Then who? His eyes flickered toward the door. Come inside. I'll show you something. Every rational thought told me to leave, but curiosity and something deeper made me follow. The house smelled the same. Cedar, dust, and the faint sweetness of old wood polish. Sunlight poured through lace curtains, lighting up the hallway where family photos hung crookedly. I noticed one near the stairs. Ethan as a kid, grinning beside a man I'd never seen. His father. You look like him, I said before thinking. Ethan stopped. Everyone says that. He turned toward the staircase. The attic's this way. As we climbed, the air grew cooler. My heart beat faster with every step. The key in my pocket felt like a secret burning through my palm. At the top. He stopped in front of a narrow door. The paint was cracked, the knob slightly rusted. Go ahead, he said. It's yours now. I frowned. Mine? He nodded. You'll understand. I took a deep breath and slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click. The door creaked open, revealing a room filled with boxes, old books, and a single wooden desk by the window. Dust danced in the sunlight. This is where he spent most of his life, Ethan said quietly. Writing things down. Keeping records no one asked for. I stepped inside. Papers covered the desk, notes, photographs, envelopes. One in particular caught my eye. It was addressed to me, Lena. My name, written in careful, slanted handwriting. My throat tightened. Why would your father write to me? Ethan's jaw clenched. I didn't know he did. Until a few months ago. I picked up the envelope. The paper felt old, fragile. I looked at Ethan for permission. He nodded once. Inside was a short letter, written in blue ink. If you ever find this, I want you to know. I was the reason you left. Not my son. He only pushed you away to protect you. Some truths take time to understand. I read it twice before the meaning hit me. Protect me? From what? Ethan turned toward the window, his hands in his pockets. My father had plans. He wanted to take something from your family. Something to do with those old property records. When I found out, I tried to stop him. But I couldn't make him listen. I stared at him. So you pushed me away because he threatened to ruin your family if you stayed close to me. Silence filled the room. The kind that presses on your chest. You should have told me. I whispered. I couldn't, he said, his voice breaking slightly. You were leaving for college. I thought if you hated me, it'd be easier. I swallowed hard. It wasn't. He looked at me then. Really looked at me. I know. For a moment, the years fell away. The distance, the silence. All of it vanished under the weight of what wasn't said. I turned back to the desk, running my hand over the papers. You kept all this? I didn't have the heart to throw it away. There was something in his tone, regret wrapped in longing. I found another photo tucked under a folder. Me and Ethan at the summer fair. Arms around each other, smiling at something just out of frame. The back had a date written in pencil, June 14th, the day before I left. You remember this? I asked. He smiled faintly. Every detail. I thought you didn't care. I cared too much. The words hung between us. I didn't know what to say. The house felt suddenly smaller, the air thicker. He walked over, leaning against the window frame. After he died, I found letters he'd written to half the town. Apologies, confessions. Things I wish I'd known sooner. Did he ever apologize to you? Ethan looked away. In his own way, maybe. We stood there in silence, the attic filled with the sound of creaking wood and distant birds. It felt like standing at the edge of something fragile. A moment that could tip either toward forgiveness or another goodbye. Finally, I said, "Why show me this now?" He turned to me, eyes soft but heavy. Because you were the only part of my past that felt real. And I'm tired of pretending it didn't matter. My chest tightened. I wanted to reach for him, to close the space that time had built between us. But before I could, his phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at it, and his face changed. "I have to go," he said. "What is it?" He hesitated. "Someone else found one of my father's letters. And it mentions you again." I stared at him. "Me? Why?" He met my eyes. "Because apparently, my father wasn't the only one who kept secrets from you." The room seemed to tilt slightly, my breath catching as a new wave of confusion and dread washed over me. "What are you saying?" I whispered. He stepped closer, his voice low. "I think your family knew more about mine than you ever realized." And before I could ask another question, he was already heading down the stairs, leaving me alone in the attic. holding the letter that changed everything. Outside, the blue door creaked again in the wind, as if the house itself was waking up, ready to tell the truth neither of us was prepared to hear. The next day, I went back. The house looked different in the daylight, less haunted, more human. The blue door was open again, and the faint hum of music came from somewhere inside. Ethan was in the living room, surrounded by open boxes and scattered letters. His eyes looked tired, but when he saw me, he smiled, faint, cautious. "You came," he said. "I had to," I replied. "You said those letters mentioned my family." He nodded slowly, motioning for me to sit. On the table lay a stack of envelopes tied with string. He untied one and handed it to me. "This one," he said. "Read the date." I looked. The envelope was dated the same week I left for college. 10 years ago. My hands trembled as I opened it. The handwriting was his father's. "To Thomas and Claire Rivers," it began. "I know the deal didn't go through as planned, but my son doesn't need to know. He believes she left because of him. Let it stay that way." My heart stopped for a moment. Thomas and Claire Rivers. My parents. I looked up at Ethan. "My parents?" He nodded. "Your father and mine worked together on a land purchase years ago. There was a disagreement. My father tried to claim something that wasn't his. When your father threatened to go public, mine panicked." "So? What happened?" I asked quietly. "He came to your parents. He made a deal. He'd stay silent if they made sure you stayed away from me." The words felt like glass breaking in my chest. "You're saying they wanted me to leave? Not because they didn't care," he said gently. "Because they thought they were protecting you. My father wasn't kind back then. He had a temper, a pride he couldn't let go of. They thought keeping us apart would keep you safe." I sank back in my chair, the truth settling heavy between us. All those years I thought Ethan had pushed me away because he stopped caring. All those years he thought I hated him. And all along it had been our parents, their choices, their silence. Ethan spoke again, voice soft. "I found that letter after my father passed. I almost burned it. Then I saw your name. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I didn't know how. After so long. How do you even begin to explain something like that?" I looked at him, the years of misunderstanding flashing between us like scenes from an old film. "You could have tried," I whispered. He nodded slowly. "You're right." The quiet stretched again. Not cold, just full. I noticed his hands shaking slightly, the way his thumb kept tracing the edge of the table. "Your father wasn't all bad," he said after a moment. "I think he regretted it. I think he wanted me to tell you the truth one day." I looked around the room. The old photographs, the open letters, the pieces of two families tangled in lies and good intentions. "Maybe they thought they were doing the right thing," I said. "Maybe everyone did." "Maybe," he said. "But it doesn't change what it cost." Our eyes met, 10 years of silence collapsing in a heartbeat. "You know," I said quietly, "when I left I waited for you to call. Every day for weeks." His voice was barely a whisper. "I used to wait outside that blue door every night just in case you came back." The weight of it, the missed chances, the years lost, hung between us like fog. Then Ethan reached for another letter. "There's one more," he said. "This one was addressed to me." He opened it carefully, unfolded the paper, and read aloud. "If you ever find her again, tell her the truth. She deserves that much. And when you do, ask her about the photo she took the day before she left. The one with the old map behind you both. It's the only proof left." Ethan looked up, his brow furrowed. "A map?" I froze. I remembered that photo, We'd taken it in his backyard, against the wall of his father's shed. I'd framed it in my old apartment years ago, but I'd never noticed a map. There's a copy of it somewhere, I said. At my mother's house. Ethan stood. Then we need to see it. His tone was steady, determined, but underneath it, I could hear the tremor of something else. Hope, maybe. Or fear. We walked outside together, the air cool and still. For a moment, it felt like being 17 again. Two kids standing on the edge of something bigger than they understood. Lena, he said suddenly, stopping at the gate. Before we find whatever that map means, I need to ask you something. I turned to him. His voice was low, careful. After everything, if this truth changes everything we thought we knew, will you still want to know me? The question hit deeper than I expected. I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could, his phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen and went pale. What is it? I asked. He looked at me, voice tight. It's from my father's lawyer. There's another letter, one he left unopened. It's not addressed to me this time. Then who? He held out the phone. The name glowed on the screen. To Lena Rivers. My breath caught. He whispered. He wrote to you again. But he didn't want me to see it. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The world felt too still, too heavy. Then Ethan said quietly, Do you want to read it together? Or alone? The question hung between us. The soft wind carrying everything we hadn't said. And just like that, the truth that had broken everything was about to do it again. The morning after our conversation, the house felt different. Lighter, somehow. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was full of things understood, but not yet said, aloud. Ethan sat on the porch, coffee mug in hand, staring at the horizon like he was watching the past fade away. I stood by the window for a long time, watching him breathe, watching the way the light hit his face. When I finally stepped outside, he didn't turn. He just said quietly, I never told him I loved him, I guess. I was waiting for him to leave so I could stop pretending I wasn't angry. I sat beside him, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. And now? I asked. He took a slow sip of coffee. Now I think I was angry at myself, for letting everything slip away, for letting you slip away. My throat tightened. The morning breeze carried the faint scent of rain. You didn't let me go, Ethan, I said softly. We both just didn't know how to stay. He finally looked at me. His eyes weren't as guarded as before. There was something new in them. Calm. Acceptance. Maybe even hope. For a while, we just sat there, watching the light change. No rush. No fear of words. Then he stood, went inside and returned with a small wooden box. I remembered it instantly, his mother's keepsake box. He placed it on the table between us and opened it. Inside were letters, old photos, and one envelope that hadn't been opened. He handed it to me. He left this, he said quietly. I couldn't bring myself to read it until now. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. His father's. Ethan, if you're reading this, I want you to know I always saw the good in you. Even when you thought I didn't, I stayed too long in silence, too long in pride. Don't do the same. Love, when you still have the chance. When I looked up, Ethan's eyes were wet. But his smile, that quiet, honest smile, was the most peaceful I'd ever seen on him. He exhaled. He knew, he whispered. All this time he knew. I nodded, feeling something in me release. The weight of years, of missed chances. Maybe he waited for you to understand, I said. Just like I waited for this moment. He looked at me, really looked at me. Do you think it's too late? The question hung between us, fragile but real. I thought of everything, the lost time, the silence, the things we never said. Then I shook my head. No, I said. I think we were just learning how to be ready. We spent the rest of the morning cleaning the porch, fixing the loose railing, and laughing over little things. Every moment felt ordinary and new at the same time, like rediscovering color after years of gray. When the rain finally came, it was gentle. We stood under the awning, the smell of wet earth filling the air. Ethan reached out, his hand hesitating for a moment before finding mine. It wasn't a grand gesture, just quiet understanding. I'm sorry, he said, for everything I didn't say before. I smiled. You just said it now. And that was enough. Weeks later, after I'd gone back home, a letter arrived in my mailbox. His handwriting neat, careful. Inside was a small photograph of the old porch, newly painted white, with 2 mugs sitting side by side. On the back he'd written, I finally stopped waiting for someone to leave. I'm learning to stay. I held that photo for a long time, tears blurring the words. It wasn't a love story that began again. It was one that had finally learned peace. That night, I placed the photo on my nightstand and watched the rain tap softly on the window, just like that morning on his porch. And I realized, love doesn't always come back to fix what was broken. Sometimes it comes back to remind you that it was real. The porch light in the photo glowed faintly under the storm. A symbol, maybe, that not all endings are sad. Some just arrive quietly. In their own time, I whispered into the stillness, Thank you, Ethan. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the ache of what was lost. I felt gratitude for what was found, and for the peace that love, even after all these years, still knew how to bring.